Hi guys, so in this video I want to do a tour of my bookshelves because, as I've mentioned before, I've just moved flat and now I have my bookshelves the way I like them, sort of organised the way I wanted, and I thought it would be quite nice to share that with you. So I have 4 of these small bookshelves that are almost full with books, and they are just from Homebase in the UK, and I got the small ones rather than really high ones just because I live in a rented flat, so I can't attach bookshelves to walls, and these small ones are freestanding. So while I'd love one day to have a proper library with floor-to-ceiling walls of books, unfortunately I can't quite manage that right now, but I do like the way I've managed to set it all out. Okay, I've actually just now filmed talking about all the books, and I've realised quite how many I haven't read, and I want to justify myself somewhat by saying that I take out a lot of library books, and I'd say that maybe almost 50% of the books I read are library books, so there are so many great books I've read over the last few years that I just don't own, and there's lots that I would like to eventually own, but it means that I end up accumulating a lot of books that I've purchased that it takes a long time for me to read. So that is me trying to justify owning so many unread books, probably quite unsuccessfully, but I do really enjoy using the library, and I think it's just an incredible service that I can read as many books as I want for free, so I want to take as much advantage of that as I possibly can. Okay, so now I'm just going to launch right into talking about the books, because now that I have actually filmed it I realise quite how long it takes to mention every single book that I own. I hope you enjoy it anyway. I just wanted to quickly mention some of the books that are on top of my bookshelves, because I have some that are just too big in terms of format to fit. Firstly, these are just 2 library books that I have out just now. I have In Our Mad and Furious City and The Overstory, which are 2 Van Booker nominated books that I really want to get around to, considering the winner's already been announced. And then I have some of these larger format books, including the 3 Harry Potter Illustrated Edition, a couple of other Harry Potter books like A History of Magic and Making of Fantastic Beasts, and then a couple of other more miscellaneous things like Game of Thrones, kind of picture book, and Face Paint, a book about makeup. Then I have a collection of really small books like Philip Pullman's Imaginary Friends, Robert Macfarlane's The Gifts of Reading. These are both really interesting books about books that I've talked about in another video. I'll link that above and in the description. And then I really like these Penguin 70th anniversary editions of lots of their sort of previously published books. They all have very stunning covers, very interesting designs. I also really like these Penguin Great Ideas books, that they have these kind of cardboard covers all with really nice kind of geometric pattern type designs. There's another one here like this. And then also further down there are lots of these Penguin Little Black Classics. These ones are just all 80p. They came out a couple of years ago. I think they did 50, and potentially I think they've added more since then. But it's mostly non-fiction, but a mixture of sort of older fiction classics as well. Really interesting to kind of get a little taster of an author that you've not tried before. So now I'm just going to go through my shelves one by one, trying to go through each of the books fairly quickly. I have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Half of a Yellow Sun. I really enjoyed this book and I want to read more of her work. I have Aeschylus, the Oresteia. I've not read that yet. I have A General Theory of Oblivion. That's a Portuguese book that I read recently. The Power by Naomi Alderman. I would really recommend that one if you haven't already. It won the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, I think. A Short History of Myth. That one's really interesting. It's part of the Canongate Myth series. Kind of an introduction, and then they did other books like the Penelope Ad, Wait by Jeanette Winterson, among others. Margaret Atwood, The Blind Assassin. I haven't read this yet, but I really want to get around to it soon. Again, Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale. That's great, obviously. Jane Austen, Emma. Haven't read that yet, but I really love these lovely Penguin editions. Jane Austen, Northanger Abbey. That's one of my favourites by her. Again, Persuasion. I haven't read that one yet, so there's 2 here that I haven't read by Jane Austen. Pat Barker, Life Class. I was given this by Penguin a while back. I've not read it yet. J.M. Barrie, Peter and Wendy. Haven't read that. You'll see a theme here. There's a lot of books that I own that I have not read yet. Mary Beard, SPQR. Really interesting history of ancient Rome. Good introduction as well if you don't know a huge amount, but it is incredibly detailed if you're already into that topic. Mary Beard, Woman in Power, really interesting analysis of feminism in the 21st century. The Sell It by Paul Beattie, I haven't read this yet, want to get around to it. Alan Bennett, The Uncommon Reader, very funny novel about what it would be like if the Queen started using a mobile library. Bloody Scotland, this is an anthology of crime fiction from Scottish authors. I've read parts of it but not all of it yet. Roberto Bolaño, 2666, I read this on holiday a few years ago and I did not understand any of it. The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, I read this a very long time ago, it's great. Ink by Alice Broadway, I've not read this yet but it has a beautiful cover. His Bloody Project by Graham McCrae Burnett. This is a really interesting crime novel, very unusual format. In a similar way to like Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood, it kind of questions ideas around guilt. This is a book from Persephone Books in London. This one is The Making of a Marchioness by Frances Hodgson Burnett, who wrote The Secret Garden. I haven't got around to reading this yet. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, read this in school, it's great. Mikhail Bulgakov, I read this is The White Guard, I read this at uni. Milkman by Anna Burns, I just finished reading this. This won the Man Booker Prize this year. Very interesting, I found it quite challenging. The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton, I love this book, I really like the BBC adaptation as well. The Muse by Jessie Burton, I think this might have been better than The Miniaturist, I really enjoyed both of them. Quiet by Susan Cain, this one is about what it's like to be an introvert. It's really informative, absolutely fascinating, would highly recommend. I'll just move this. These are Trudy Calivan's The Magician's Guild series. I loved reading these when I was much younger and I just reread them this year. They're absolutely great if you want to read some fantasy that's sort of akin to Harry Potter but very different in some ways. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. I have not read this yet but I got it in a charity shop very recently. The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This is a really interesting book. I've talked about it in another video, I'll link it below. The Magical Worlds of Harry Potter. I've had this for a very long time. I got these 3 books given to me as well, which I've not read yet. They're adult fiction by Roald Dahl. Would be really interested to read those soon. Kieran Desai, The Inheritance of Loss, I read this at uni. Pocket Guide to Beer, I've not read that yet. Oliver Twist, Charles Dickens, really great book. And then onto this bottom shelf we have The Complete English Poems by John Donne, I read this in school. Gaston Doran, Lingo, this is really interesting if you have an interest in language and linguistics. It's a really great gift as well. Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Idiot, very intelligent book. Daphne du Maurier, Rebecca, I mean it's great, I recently read it for the first time and can't believe I've waited this long. Tallulah Rising, Glenn Duncan. Michelle Faber, The Book of New Things. I have 3 Michelle Faber books that I've not read actually here and I really want to get around to them. The Oyster Thief by Sonia Faruqi. I was recently given this by the publisher very kindly and I want to read it very soon. It's definitely in the theme recently of mermaid themed books. And next we have William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying. I read this quite a long time ago and I remember not understanding it, so maybe I need to reread it. Britannia, My Country. This is about Muslims in Britain. It is well written, but I feel like it probably shouldn't have been written by a non-Muslim. Madame Bovary. This I really love. I've not read it since I was at uni though, so I probably need to reread it. The Etymologicon by Mark Forsyth. Again, this is really interesting if you like linguistics and language and the history of language. History of Wolves by Emery Friedland. I read this last year, I think. It was interesting, but maybe a little bit underwhelming for me. Stephen Fry, Mythos, absolutely loved this. I think his narrative voice is genius, and he is incredibly intelligent without ever seeming stuffy. Swimming Lessons by Claire Fuller, haven't yet read this yet. Again, haven't read this. Carlo Emilio Goda, The Experience of Pain, I know nothing about it. Neil Gaiman, American Gods, I need to get around to reading this, definitely. I've not read nearly as much Neil Gaiman as I should. Neil Gaiman, Norse Mythology, this is one that I have read, and similar to Mythos, is a really great introduction to Norse mythology. I've mentioned this in another video, I will link it above and below. I have some Gabriel Garcia Marquez books here, but my copy of 100 Years of Solitude is actually elsewhere. It is one of my favourite books ever. Elizabeth Gaskell Ruth, haven't read that yet. Bad Feminist Roxane Gay, really interesting selection of feminist essays. I have some John Green books here. Sight by Jessie Greengrass, this was a really fascinating insight into motherhood, which I feel like I've talked about loads. How to Read Water by Tristan Gooley, this is definitely interesting if you want to know everything there is to know about water, but if you're not as fascinated as him, it can seem a little bit dry. The Mermaid Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gower, this is just a proof. It was definitely one of my favourite books I've read this year. Complete Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm, I've read parts of this, I mean it's great, I don't need to say anything else about this. Advantage Play, this is about sport. How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, this was good if a little bit twee, which I find his writing to sometimes be. I was given this, the Rules of Seeing by Joe Heap by the publisher, I've not got around to reading this yet. Ernest Hemingway, Farewell to Arms, I read this a long time ago. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, this is great literature and very, very short, very readable, but very intelligent. Herman Hesse, The Glass Bead Game, I have not read this yet, but it was part of the 2 for £5 deal in FOP, which I can never resist. Homer the Odyssey, I mean it's The Odyssey by Homer, it's pretty good. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, I found this overrated. I've talked quite a lot about this in another video, I can link that above. Khaled Hosseini and The Mountains Echoed, I really like his writing. I don't seem to have his other books here actually, but it is, I'm not necessarily sure how culturally accurate it is, but I find them very entertaining. The Loney by Andrew Michael Hurley, Christopher Isherwood, Goodbye to Berlin, Kazuo Ishiguro, The Bird Giant. In fact, I have several of Kazuo Ishiguro's books here. I've made a video about his books. I think he's an amazing author and one of my favourites, even though I only discovered his writing a few years ago. The Snow Child, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I read this fairly recently. It was the first book I've read by Shirley Jackson, actually. I definitely want to read more. Jane Johnson, The Salt Road. I bought this accidentally looking for a different book called The Salt Road. Ragnar Jonasson, The Darkness, interesting Scandic noir type crime novel. Silence by Erling Kagge, haven't read that yet. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, this is probably my favourite non-fiction book. It's about how the brain works, both quickly in sort of instinctive decision making and slow when we process things more slowly and make more thought out logical decisions. Very fascinating, intelligently written, just great. When I Hit You by Mina Kandasamy, I read this year as well, it was great. The Vegetarian by Han Kang, Border by Katka Kasabova, Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, and The Good People by Hannah Kent. I have really enjoyed both of her books and I'm really hoping that she writes more soon. Himself by Jess Kidd, I haven't read this yet actually, which I would really like to do. I found her very interesting and she has a couple of books that I'd like to read. Cell by Mick Kitson. I have also spoken about this in another video. Very interesting, very Scottish, which I like. When They Call You a Terrorist. This is a non-fiction book about the Black Lives Matter movement. I have not yet read it, but I think I really ought to. The Lonely City by Olivia Laing. I haven't read this yet. The Changeling by Victor Laval, and Hatildor Laxness, Independent People. I need to read this for sure soon. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Pachinko by Minjin Lee. I've not read this yet, I got it in a charity shop as well. I would really like to, I've heard good things about it. Matthew Lewis, The Monk, great gothic fiction. Hot Milk by Deborah Levy, again, I found it in a charity shop but haven't yet read it. The Outrun by Amy Liptrot, The Gloaming by Kirsty Logan, this was brilliant. Great ending as well. Robert Macfarlane, Landmarks. I would really like to read his writing, but I haven't really read anything yet. New Finnish Grammar, Life of Pi, The Return by Hisham Matar, Charles Robert Mashur, Men with the Wanderer. This is great, and Sarah Perry's new book Melmoth is based off it. A Gathering by Alexander McCall Smith, a poetry collection. He edited it, he didn't write the poems. The Number One Ladies Detective Agency by Alexander McCall Smith. Cormac McCarthy, Blood Meridian, Reality is Broken, Jane McGonigal. This, I've not read it, but it is supposedly a very interesting book about gaming. John McGregor, Reservoir 13, Holly McNish Plum, poetry collection. Eating Air, Pauline Melville. Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a brilliant book, very beautiful as well. John Milton, Paradise Lost, The Marshmallow Test by Walter Michel, and The Tidal Zone by Sarah Moss, which I read last year, I think, and I absolutely loved it. These are some more of my hardback books that don't fit in my shelves. Fairly self-explanatory here. I've read almost all of them. I haven't read The Lord of the Rings yet, but it is slightly putting me off by how large it is, even though I think it's something that I really ought to read. I've not yet read the Kate Atkinson book either, which I would really like to get around to soon. And Philip Pullman's The Book of Dust is probably my favourite up here. I just absolutely love his writing and the world of his dark materials. Mistletoe Bride by Kate Moss. This is a collection of kind of gothic fiction, short stories, Element by Fiona Mosley, and then I have quite a large collection of Haruki Murakami novels. He's one of my absolutely favourite authors. I'm currently reading Killing Commendatory, his most recent one. I'll definitely let you know what I think. And then along from that we have Iris Murdoch, Under the Net. I've not read this one yet. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, A Grain of Wheat. This is very interesting, very powerful. Hotel Silence. This is a lovely, very cosy Icelandic book. History of Heavy Metal, quite different. George Orwell, 1984. Emilia Pardo Bazan, House of Ullo. I read this for uni, and same with this one, Nightmare Abbey. I have the two Sarah Perry books. I've absolutely loved her writing so far. I'm really interested to see what she comes out with next, even though Melmoth has just been released. Petronius the Satyricon. I haven't read this yet. Steven Pinker, The Blank Slate. This is very interesting, but I've heard that it's perhaps not the most accurate non-fiction book about the idea of the human mind being a blank slate at birth. The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley. I really enjoyed this one. I found the kind of steampunk elements really interesting and really fun as well. Philip Pullman. I haven't actually read this, even though I love him as an author. This is The Good Man Jesus and The Scoundrel Christ. I have apparently only two of my Philip Pullman His Dark Materials book. I only need to look at the third. The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. I really enjoyed this. I've talked about this in other videos. I don't think it got nearly as much praise as it deserves. I haven't read this yet, The Vikings. Presumably this is non-fiction. The Passion of Harry Bingo. Oh, there's a little Harry Potter book in here. And then I have my collection of Harry Potter novels, the ones I read when I was 7 years old. My last couple Harry Potter books, including The Cursed Child script, which I've not actually read, although I did see it on the stage and it was great. I've just not heard great things about the actual script. The Tobacconist by Robert Ziethaler. Will Self Phone, I've not read it, probably won't. Jose Saramago, The Gospel According to Jesus Christ. And then I have a couple of Shakespeare. I have Camilla Shamsi, Homefire. I have Nan Shepherd. This, you can't read this at all. This says The Living Mountain. Mikhail Sholokhov and Quiet Flows the Dawn, Zadie Smith, Swing Time, Ali Smith, Autumn and Winter. She is a brilliant author. I only appear to own 2 of her books, but I have read quite a lot more. Rebecca Solnit, A Field Guide to Getting Lost. I really want to read this one soon, actually. I have Sophocles, the 3 Theban plays. I haven't read that yet. I had an idea that I was going to read a lot more ancient literature at the start of the year. I definitely mentioned it on one of my videos. And I really have not done that yet. Then I have a selection of the newly published Muriel Spark novels, which are really lovely. Then I have also a Canongate edition of Muriel Spark, The Finishing School, which is her last novel. I have The Heart of Man, I've not read that yet, and Waypoints by Ian Stephen. And we are getting to the end. This is the last shelf, actually. It does include actually some of the most interesting books, I think. There is Perfume by Patrick Suskind. I absolutely really adored this book. It was one of the most unique books I've ever read, I think. I have The Mortal Coil. I haven't read that yet. Then I have Robert Louis Stevenson, Kidnapped. I have My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Talent. This was one of the most affecting books I've read in a really long time. Very harrowing, difficult to read at points, but really incredible. Then A Cat, a Man and Two Women. I just read that a couple of weeks ago. Very quintessentially Japanese and very heartwarming, I think. The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I haven't read either of these two Donna Tartt books yet, but I did read The Secret History earlier this year, and it's one of my absolute favourite books now, so I bought her other two books and really, really would like to read them shortly. Fake News by Derek J. Taylor. This is a history of fake news throughout the course of history. I was gifted this actually by the publisher. I'd really like to read it soon. I feel like it's particularly pertinent now. And then I have Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Then I appear to have another version of this book, very good. Jesmyn Ward, Sing and Buried Sing, Sarah Waters' The Little Stranger. I really need to read some Sarah Waters because I haven't read any of her books yet, which is, I think, quite dreadful of me. Then I have H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. This was really interesting. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. The Picture of Dorian Gray, a really brilliant novel. I can't read these red spines. Stoner by John Williams, Tennessee Williams, The Glass Menagerie, I've not read that yet. Jeanette Winterson, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. Again, I've read this just a couple of weeks ago, shockingly for the first time. It is as genius as everyone says. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I did not understand this book either. There are a few here that I've read quite a while back where I feel like I was not understanding books to their full capacity, so I do need to give them another shot. A Room of One's Own. This is one by Virginia Woolf that I did appreciate. The Waves by Virginia Woolf. Virgil, the Aeneid. I have not got round to that yet. Slaughterhouse-Five, and The Book of Joan by Lydia Yuknavitch, published by Canongate, which sounds very, very unusual and particularly fascinating. So there we are. Those are all the books that I own on my bookshelves. It's not my absolutely definitive collection of books. I own a lot from when I was much younger that I haven't managed to fit into my flat, but one day I will have that dream library and I can own all the books that I have ever read. For now though, I'm pretty happy with my setup. It's really nice to be able to just sit down and see all the books that I own and have the memories that are associated with them. I am definitely a big proponent of audiobooks and ebooks and libraries and borrowing, but there is obviously something really nice about owning a book and having it on a bookshelf as well. So please tell me which of these books that I should really, really get onto reading, because I just now feel guilty about having so many that I haven't read yet. And I will definitely be posting a video very shortly because I'm starting to think about Christmas gift guide type videos, and I'm imagining I'll put up 2 videos over the next few weeks in relation to that. So hopefully you look forward to those, and I'll see you very soon. Okay, bye bye.